Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about something different today. Today, we're going to be talking about Call of Duty World War II and at least the history behind it. There's a lot of rich history behind these video games that we play each and every day. In particular, World War II is based on a pretty big chunk of history. Pretty much how I feel about going with this is we're going to break down each map piece by piece. Not each map, each section of this game piece by piece. We're going to cover at first the multiplayer section and each individual map, and then I might go through the campaign and cover each individual mission and see if there's any historical inaccuracies or just detail the history about particular events that would have either been based off of or it pretty much is. I guess you could say based off of regardless. But for now, we're talking about Pointe du Hoc. Pointe du Hoc is part of the Normandy landings. Simply as that. It's right in the bio for the level. And it's one of the, well, not one of the lesser known ones. It's one of the ones that are not always focused on. You'd always see talks about Omaha Beach, and pretty much primarily Omaha Beach because that is one of the biggest ones. In Canada, you hear talks about, I forget. Well, I don't know if we called it D-Day or something like that. I know I should know, but I just don't know. So, what is Pointe du Hoc? Well, you'd have to enter in the history behind it. And that is, the Battle of Pointe du Hoc, which is, again, part of the Normandy landings. This particular section of the landings was taken out by the 2nd Ranger Battalion alongside the 5th Ranger Battalion of the American armies. They were going up against the 914th Grenadier Regiment of the German army, or the Axis powers. Quite a beautiful map, isn't it? The forces were roughly the same-ish, even though it was still heavily in favor of the Germans at first. They were pretty much going toe-to-toe, 200 men-ish to 200 men-ish. Except, as you can tell, Pointe du Hoc does not look like the easiest beach to get on. There was a massive cliff that spanned across most of the landing site, and in order to actually get up it, they would have to use grenade launcher-style things and literally shoot grappling hooks up the side of the long walls. Constantly taking machine gun fire and dealing with the different elements that were just apparent on that day. I think by the time the battle was through, the Americans had less than half of their men left. After even getting a foothold on the rocky cliffs, they would constantly be bombarded with counterattacks upon counterattacks until eventually the Allies won. We all know how that happened or worked out. The Allies eventually did win. And so that's pretty much what Pointe du Hoc depicts. It depicts the battle itself, I guess, or the American troops as they have landed and have gotten up the side of it. This genuinely is one of the cooler ones, and I think this was depicted in Call of Duty World War II as well, because you also had to rappel up a wall in order to get into the German bunkers. The only other things really to note about this is that it was pretty much directly beside Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. Two other sections of the Normandy landing in Omaha Beach we can actually go into further detail once we actually, get into the campaign. And if I'm doing my checking correctly, yes, that's just about it. There's not a lot to cover in these multiplayer maps, and the battles aren't something I'm going to go too in-depth with. I'm not going to get into specific numbers, but I am going to say that even though it didn't seem costly, 100 men in a single section is still terrible. And just think about all the losses that were going on in other sections. It couldn't have been easy. One last look. And now I think we're done. The only inaccuracies that could ever happen in multiplayer, and I will state this now so that going forward it doesn't have to be stated too often, the only inaccuracies you can ever find in a single multiplayer map is restricted to what the players do. If the players bring in a weapon that wouldn't have been used, then yeah, I don't. There's not much else to say aside from, yeah, that would be an inaccuracy. The ability to use weapons and score streaks is probably the biggest inaccuracy, or at least the biggest inaccuracy when they're used in the wrong setting. But me, I have loaded out my class right here with an M1 Garand and M1911 as a secondary, and of course as the American Infantry. At least I think I'm American. Point is, the only time inaccuracies ever come from these maps is when a player decides to use something that otherwise wouldn't have been used on that map. Aside from the fact that, I guess, there's some things, you wouldn't play a match of Gridiron in the middle of a Normandy landing. Aside from that, game modes and all that aside, this is a really cool piece of history, and honestly, one of the lesser depicted forms of the Normandy beach landings during World War II. And this is merely the tip of the iceberg for what I plan to do. I will polish and refine this series as we go on and get into deeper, maybe deeper details throughout the history, and maybe stumble upon some lesser known battles, but who knows. Anyways, really hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out.